Can everyone see that? Perfect. So like Roxy said, I'm Nick Dimitrazik. I'm a program coordinator with the Community Assistance Teams Initiative here at EFC, and I'm joined by Ashley and Cirillo from the Department of Health. And we're going to be talking about the state revolving funds and funding opportunities for water infrastructure projects. So an overview of the agenda today, we'll go through a little bit of information about EFC and what we do. Then we'll talk about the state revolving funds, how they function and operate. Then we'll talk about our federal bipartisan infrastructure law or bill funding opportunities, our different grant programs, the Bond Act and its implications to funding, and then go through a couple technical assistance opportunities. So a little bit about EFC and what we do. So we fund New York State water infrastructure, and we do it in a couple of different ways. So we first have our Clean Water State Revolving Fund, which is low-cost capital for sewer and wastewater treatment projects. And then we also have the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, which is low-cost capital for drinking water projects. In addition to those, we have our state water grants programs, which help ease the cost burden of those capital infrastructure costs. And then finally, we have federal bipartisan infrastructure law funding, which is administered through both state revolving funds. So an overview of our investment, we have one of the largest state revolving funds in the nation. So since 1990, when we've been able to provide $35.8 billion in funding to wastewater projects. Since the introduction of the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund in 1996, we've been able to provide almost $9 billion in funding to drinking water projects. And then since 2015, we provided $2 billion in EFC water grants to 1,000 projects. So an overview of the types of financial assistance we can offer. We have both short-term financing and long-term financing available. And so our short-term is designed to help you actually design and construct your project, and that's up to a 5-year term. And then we also have our long-term financing, which is amortized up to a term of 30 years. And we're able to offer a couple different types of interest rates, both subsidized, market rate, and interest-free financing. So an overview of our different types of grants that we offer. We have our Engineering Planning Grant, or EPG, our Water Infrastructure Improvement, or WIA program, our Intermunicipal Grants, or IMG, our Green Innovation Grant Program, or GIGP, our State Revolving Fund Grants, or SRF, and our Bipartisan Infrastructure Grants, BIL. So an overview of the state revolving funds and how they operate. So we start with seed money from the EPA and then a match from the state of New York. Those go into the fund and are loaned out to projects. As those projects pay back the money, it goes back into the fund and revolves. And we also use proactive fund management in bond sales to boost the amount of money that we're able to loan out. So this is an introduction to our intended use plan. This is going to be the first step if you'd like to seek state revolving funds. And so this is prepared annually by law. And it describes how each SRF program is going to run. It lists the funds that are available and then identifies how those funds are actually going to be used. And we do that through the project rank and scoring process. So each project is ranked and scored based on water quality and public health impacts as described in submitted documentation by applicants. And then we determine eligible costs, and that's based on estimates from engineer reports, plans specifications, and contract awards. And you can use a QR code to scan to get to that page on our website. So this is an overview of our project priority lists that make up our intended use plan. So we first have our multi-year list, and this is for projects that have expressed interest in receiving SRF financial assistance at some point. Then we have our annual list, and that is projects that can actually receive financial assistance in the current federal fiscal year. So it's important to note, you could come in on our multi-year list and let us know that you're interested at some point in receiving funding through the program, and we can kind of talk to you about how you might be able to access that and those types of things. And then once you're ready to actually apply for funding, you can go on our annual list, and that requires an engineering report and a couple of other things I'll discuss in a minute. And then finally, we have our bill eligible lists. So this determines how our bipartisan infrastructure law funds are going to be spent. and we have three separate ones: a bill, general supplemental, emerging contaminant, and lead service line replacement lists. So, an overview of how to apply then the actual financing process. So, the first thing you're going to want to do is list your project. So, for the 2025 IUP, new project listings and project updates will be due by June 14th, and that's at 5 p.m. So, once or to list your project, it's different depending on the type of program you're trying to access. So, for the clean water side of things, you can use our project listing and update system, or Plus, online to submit your listing. But for the drinking water state revolving fund, you can submit an actual project listing form to design@health.ny.gov. And in order to be on the annual list, as I mentioned, you must have an engineering report and a completed smart growth form. So once we receive those, as I mentioned before, we have our project rank and scoring process. And then once that's done, we release our IUP, and that accounts for how those funds are going to be administered each year. Once that's out, you can actually get ready to submit your application for financing. So that's a separate process. And those are accepted through June in any federal fiscal year. And again, you can scan a QR code to go to a page with additional information. So an overview of the types of eligible projects for both of the funds. The Clean Water State Revolving Fund is administered by the Environmental Facilities Corporation in partnership with the Department of Environmental Conservation. And some different types of projects that are eligible include municipal treatment works projects, non-point source projects, those included in national estuary conservation and management plans, decentralized systems, and recycled water and water reuse. On the drinking water side of things, this is administered by EFC in partnership with the Department of Health, and you can have projects that provide the public with safe drinking water, upgrade or replace drinking water infrastructure, address non-compliance with federal or state health standards, and prevent future violations of those standards. We'll now go into an overview of our federal bipartisan infrastructure law, or bill. So bill funding for water infrastructure is being administered through those state revolving funds, as I mentioned, over a 5-year period. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, we have our different pools of funding. This is for the 2023 federal fiscal year. It will be a little bit different from the 2024 federal fiscal year, but a similar idea. On the clean water side, we had $230 million to provide as general supplemental, and the required additional subsidy for that was 49%. And it's important to note for all of these categories, the required additional subsidies are based on the full cap grant amount that we receive and are not necessarily based on, or not necessarily available per project. It's important to note. On the emerging contaminant side, we had $23 million available with a required additional subsidy of 100% on that. Now I'll let Ashley go through the drinking water side of things.
All right, so through the bipartisan infrastructure law, there are 3 separate pots of funding for drinking water. The first is what we call the general supplemental, which supplements our DWSRF loan program. So the same types of projects, we can fund water treatment, upgrades, storage, transmission, distribution, metering, all of that type of work. And but you must be a disadvantaged community. So, and then for the second category is the emerging contaminants. And, we had a $36 million available for last year. We were required to give all of that out as grant last year. And then the third part of funding for bill was specifically for lead service lines. And I can go into more detail on each of these in a few minutes, but we had $114 million available for that in 2023.
Great, thank you, Ashley. So an overview of the eligible projects for the clean water side of bill on our general supplemental. It's going to be the same types of projects that are eligible for the standard Clean Water State Revolving Fund, like wastewater treatment facilities, pumping stations and sewers, combined sewer overflow abatement, stormwater pollution abatement, and other municipally owned projects or portions of projects that maintain, protect, or improve water quality. Now, on the emerging contaminant side, it's a little bit different. So this is for construction costs on CWSRF eligible projects whose primary purpose is to address emerging contaminants that are manufactured or naturally occurring physical, chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear materials which are known or anticipated in the environment that may pose newly identified or re-emerging risks to human health, aquatic life, or the environment, including but not limited to groundwater or surface water contamination caused by PFAS, pharmaceuticals, personal care products, and micro and nanoplastics. So some more information on the general supplemental side. We have grant funding up to 50% of eligible project costs, net of non-EFC grants, up to a maximum amount of $25 million. In order to be eligible, projects must be listed in IUP Category D. And then some caveats here. You must not have closed an EFC financing or incurred SRF eligible debt for the project before November 15th, 2021. Issued a notice to proceed to construction for the project dated before November 15th, 2021. Executed a long-term project financing agreement for the project, substantially completed the project before October 1st of 2023, or been on subcategory D1 list for 2 consecutive IUP years without closing on a project finance agreement with EFC. So to establish who's going to get this funding, we draw a bill general supplemental funding line in subcategory D1 to identify projects that qualify for the additional subsidy. And they're going to be sorted in blended affordability score order. Projects that are above the line are eligible to receive an additional subsidy award letter for the amounts listed. Projects below the line will not receive an additional subsidy award letter in that federal fiscal year. Turning now to the emerging contaminant side of things, we have grant funding up to 100% of eligible project costs, up to a maximum amount of $25 million. Additional subsidy is offered in project priority score order. To be considered for additional subsidy, a municipality must not have been included in category EC in the IUP, been included in category EC in the IUP, not executed a CWSRF short-term project financing agreement or incurred SRF eligible debt before November 15th, 2021, not executed a long-term project financing agreement, and not have substantially completed construction before October 1st of 2023. I'll turn it over to Ashley to discuss the drinking water side of things.
Great, thank you, Nick. As I mentioned in the previous slide, there are 3 separate funds through the bipartisan infrastructure law, the general supplemental, the emerging contaminants, and the lead service line. I'll just go ahead and dive into the next slides and we can dig a little deeper. So for the bill general supplemental, that is just for state-defined disadvantaged communities. If you have a question about what that is or how we make that determination, please reach out to me. I can figure that out for you very quickly. But we basically use the 2021 American Community Survey data to look at your median household income, and then poverty rate if necessary, and environmental justice areas as well. So if you are a disadvantaged community and you'd like to come in for the bill general supplemental funding, you could get grant funding up to 70% of eligible project cost, not to exceed $5 million. We will score your projects just like we do for our grant program and our loan program, and we'll award projects additional subsidy, or in this case, grants. When you see additional subsidy, think grant. Our interest-free financing, we'll do that based on the score, and that will be listed in our intended use plan. To give you an idea of the competitiveness for this particular pot of funding, there are 85 projects that were identified as eligible for this general supplemental funding, and 12 were awarded. We know there's a big need out there, so it's good that there's lots of folks coming in for it, and we know that it's a good thing we have several more years of this funding to keep helping with additional projects. The next is the emerging contaminants. For drinking water projects, if you are a disadvantaged community, you could get up to 100% of eligible project cost covered. Again, not to exceed $5 million. If you are not a disadvantaged community, you could get up to 70% of eligible project cost covered, again, with that $5 million cap. We are required from EPA to give first priority to PFAS projects. Technically, we can fund other projects, but we have to give priority to those addressing and treating those compounds. And The competitiveness is still pretty high for this funding pot as well. There's 23 projects listed on the eligible list for 2024 intended use plan, and 10 were awarded funding. And the last bullet there is a little bit different criteria. It's not just the disadvantaged communities, but if you're serving a population under 25,000, you could be eligible for this as well. And for the last pot for drinking water is the lead service line replacements. We are able to fund actual replacements. If you're a disadvantaged community, you could get 70% of eligible project costs covered, not to exceed 10 million. So the caps are different for the lead service line. If you haven't done your inventory and you don't know where your lead service lines are yet, we can provide funding for that as well. If you are a disadvantaged community, you could get up to 100% of eligible project costs covered, not to exceed 2 million for this. We are, again, the grants go to disadvantaged communities. If there's remaining funding after that, then we can provide 0% loan to any eligible applicant. And we'll use that same scoring criteria that we do for all the funding, the loan, our grant, and the bill projects. Will still use the same scoring criteria that's outlined in our intended use plan. So the lead service line scores tend to look similar, but things that might differentiate your score for lead service line project might be your median household income, if you've had past exceedance level or exceedances, or I'm trying to think of the other. I'll go back to you. There's a third criteria that might make it a little bit different. But that's lead service lines. If you have any questions about any sort of projects that are on your radar, feel free to reach out to us. Nick will give you the information, contact information in a little bit.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm now going to go over some of our different grant programs that we have available. So we'll be covering our engineering planning grants, our water infrastructure improvement program, our intermunicipal grants, and our green innovation grant program. So first, we have our engineering planning grants, which provides funding for hardship communities to pay for the initial planning of an eligible Clean Water State Revolving Fund project. So it's important to note this is only available on the clean water side of things. Unfortunately, we don't have one for the drinking water state revolving fund yet. This funding is going to help develop an engineering report. As I mentioned, that's required to be on our annual list of our intended use plan. We have grant awards of up to $100,000 available for inflow and infiltration studies as required by enforcement action. And then we also have $50,000 available per project for all other types. There's currently not an open application period right now, but we believe there's one forthcoming in spring of 2024. Then next we have our Green Innovation Grant Program. Again, this is only for the clean water side of things, not the drinking water side. And this is going to support projects that utilize unique EPA designated green stormwater infrastructure designs and create cutting edge green technologies. Excuse me. So in order to be eligible, projects must implement one of the following green practices: either green stormwater infrastructure, which is to maintain and restore natural hydrology by infiltration, evapotranspiration, and harvesting stormwater; energy efficiency, which is to reduce energy consumption or produce renewable energy for a wastewater treatment plant; water efficiency, which is to reuse, conserve, or improve water efficiency; and then an environmental innovation. And again, we don't have a current open application period, but we anticipate one coming this spring. Next, we have our Water Infrastructure Improvement Program, or WIA, which is available to municipalities to fund critical wastewater and drinking water infrastructure projects. And our new round opened on February 5th and is currently open until June 14th at 5 p.m. Some eligible entities include cities, towns, villages, county or town improvement districts, Indian nation or tribe, public authority, public benefit corporations, school districts. On the clean water side of things, municipalities will be awarded 25% of total net eligible project costs, including phases of the project up to $25 million. Grants that are administered through EFC will not be backed out of net eligible project costs. So if you receive a GIGP grant or a CWSRF grant, those will not be backed out of your eligible project costs. On the drinking water side of things, municipalities will be awarded 60% of total net eligible project costs, including costs for all phases of the project, up to $5 million. The maximum a municipality can receive is $5 million a year in DWSRF grant and or WIA grant. Projects that address an emerging contaminant above the state determined maximum contaminant level, or MCL, may be awarded 60% of the total net eligible costs without a cap. And then new for this year is our enhanced WIA award for the clean water side. It's designed to assist small, rural, and disadvantaged communities. And so there's two stipulations we must meet in order to be eligible. The population of the municipality must be less than 3,500, and it must meet our hardship criteria, or without an additional grant, the project would result in user rates exceeding 1.5% of the community's MHI. And if you're eligible, you may qualify for the enhanced award, which will fund 50% of net eligible project costs. And then we have our intermunicipal grant program, and this is available for clean water and drinking water projects that serve multiple municipalities. So in order to be eligible, one municipality must apply and be the lead municipality on behalf of all other cooperating municipalities. And then there must also be a current, valid, and binding project intermunicipal agreement, or IMA, between at least two cooperating municipalities directly related to the financing and implementation of the project. We'll now go through some information on the Clean Water, Clean Air, and Green Jobs Environmental Bond Act that was passed. So this was approved by voters in November of 2022, and it was designed to protect water quality, help communities adapt to climate change, improve wildlife habitats, and create green jobs. There was a total of $4.2 billion available, specifically $650 million for water infrastructure improvement. And this is a breakdown of the funding allocation. So we have $650 million for water quality improvement and resilient infrastructure. We also have $650 million for open spaces, land conservation and recreation, $1.1 billion for restoration and flood risk reduction, and $1.5 billion for climate change mitigation. Specifically under the water quality improvement and resilient infrastructure category, a minimum of $200 million for water improvement and infrastructure projects, an additional minimum of $250 million to support municipal stormwater grants, and then $200 million to support green infrastructure projects to reduce agricultural nutrient runoff and promote soil health, projects to reduce the frequency of harmful algal blooms, or HABs, and lead service line replacement. So this is an overview of the Bond Act priorities. So the first priority is to advance environmental justice. So at least 35% of funds will be directed directly towards disadvantaged communities. Mitigate climate change, to reimagine, redesign, and rebuild with climate resilience in mind to strengthen our ability to withstand future high risk environmental events. And then finally, as the name implies, create jobs. So it's estimated that the Bond Act will create 84,000 green jobs. I want to close with some of our technical assistance opportunities. So last year, Governor Hochul announced the creation of our community assistance teams to assist small, rural, and disadvantaged communities accessing water infrastructure funding opportunities. And so we do this a couple of different ways. Once a month, we have a question and answer session that we offer where you can come and ask any questions that you may have to staff members. And then we also hold in-person events and virtual events. Finally, we have consultations that you can request. So you can sit down directly with staff members and discuss projects and determine eligibility and how to apply and that type of thing. So if you'd be interested, you can scan a QR code and go to our website and register for those. And then some contact information. So any questions related to the clean water side of things, you can reach out to CWSRF@efc.ny.gov. And then for any drinking water related questions, you can reach out to design@health.ny.gov. I'll stop sharing this and we can open it up to questions.
Thanks very much for that presentation. Do folks have some questions? There's some new opportunities with the bill funding and with the Bond Act. Yes, Liz, and then Kent.
If you could just relay the message that we're really glad for the community assistance teams. I was the town supervisor of a small town, and we did apply for these grants a couple of times, and they were hard. I mean, it was granted, it was quite a few years ago, but for little municipalities that don't have much in the way of staff, it's really helpful to have the assistance. So thank you for that. And just one other question, is it okay to post this PowerPoint to our website?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great.
And I'm also in the chat, I'm going to put some links to our different resources that I mentioned, and then also some email contacts too.
Kent, go ahead. You had a question? You're muted.
Liz answered my question. I'm all set.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, Nancy.
Is it my understanding that these grants are all actually loans? Or is there money that's actually granted?
Yes, so it depends on the program. Our state revolving funds are mainly financing. We do offer
Okay.
some grants through there in the form of additional subsidy. But we also, as I mentioned, our water infrastructure improvement program is specifically grant only. Provides grant funding. Obviously that can be used in conjunction with our state revolving funds. You can get partial financing, partial grant. And then we also have our intermunicipal grant program, and that's for those projects that are between multiple municipalities.
And their grants, okay.
Yep, and then also our engineering planning grant on the clean water side of things is grant funds. And our green innovation grant program also provides grant funding.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
I can't see everybody, so if you have a question, I'm not calling your name, just jump in. Well, I'm not familiar. Well, okay, I've watched several of your presentations, but other than that, I'm not familiar with this funding stream that much because it's just not part of my job. But I get the feeling that the Bond Act and especially the Bond Act, but also some of the climate change initiatives have broadened the scope of this funding. It seems like it was mostly around drinking water and wastewater and then some stormwater, but now it looks like there's lots of other opportunities that address climate resilience. Is that true?
Yes, so a lot of those programs under the Bond Act aren't out right yet. It's still in the process of determining exactly where those funding categories are going to be applied. But we do anticipate forthcoming those additional programs that address some of those other climate related things.
So municipalities that might have flooding or drought issues might have an opportunity to have a project do some of this. And then maybe the municipalities that have DWSB2s could perhaps seek some funding for source water protection through some of these funding opportunities. Those true statements?
I would think so, yes. Again, it hasn't been finalized yet, but I do believe some of those funds are going to be directed possibly through the Department of Environmental Conservation and some of the programs they run to address those issues. I want to also point out some of our Green Innovation Grant Program can fund certain projects like that that use those components.
Okay, that's terrific. And then June 14th is an important date. That's what we should keep in mind.
Very important. Yes, that is when everything
Okay.
comes due on our side. I'm also going to plug right now, we are putting together a WIA application video to walk through exactly how to apply for that program. So if you'd like to be notified when that comes out, you can go to our website and sign up for our emails, which actually I'll put that link in the chat as well.
Liz, do you know if we're already signed up for the emails?
I don't, but I will make sure that we are.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then most of these grants, well, a big portion of these grants require some engineering to be done in advance, right? Before they can apply. So you've got that pot of money for engineering planning. But I guess municipalities need to understand that there's a lot of times engineering required before you can move on, which makes sense, but just to be, in case that wasn't clear.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I also want to mention, while we don't have a engineering planning grant on the drinking water side of things yet, those project costs can be eligible if you apply through the state revolving fund on the back end.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you again, both of you, for coming tonight and sharing this information with us. And yeah, just send Darby's been in most contact with you. I think just send her the slides if you don't mind, please.
Absolutely.
We'll get it posted.
Yeah. And the ones that I have, I think you've already, the ones that you sent to me I've already got, so I think we're
Okay.
good. Okay.
Oh,
All right. Sounds great.
okay, so we're good then. Okay, thank you both. You're welcome to stay. They're fascinating meetings, but you're also welcome to get back to your evening. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And just one last thing I want to plug. Our a monthly question and answer session is this Friday. So if anything comes up in between now and then, please come to that and you can ask any questions. Okay.
Right, that is great. I did join last month, I think, and I believe someone from Dryden, Village of Dryden, had some very detailed questions. You can get a lot of help. So good place to go. All right, thanks so much.
Thank
And
you.
if anybody wants those dates, I think they were in the last CWIO news aggregate. So it was either the March one or the February one. So we can get that to you if you don't have those.
Thank
All
you,
right.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.